And hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the DoDCast. It's our special second half preview show. I'm District on Deck co-editor Ricky Keeler, and joining me is fellow co-editor Ron Juckett. Ron,
Hello.
How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing good. A lot of interesting news today. It's not a quiet All-Star break with a lot of big trades and huge rumors going around. Only less than a little over 2 weeks to go till the deadline. We're going to have Byron Kerr from MASN on in a few minutes. He'll hop on and talk about what we should look for in the second half. And we'll look back at some of the moments from the first half as well. But Ron, let's start off with get the legal portion of the show out of the way. For the Nationals in the appeals court today in New York in regarding to their TV rights.
They won a unanimous decision in regards to the fact, that they can now, they can't pick their panel, but it goes into an MLB-based arbitration panel. That they won 5-0. But they are not going to get any retro money, at least not at the moment. And Byron is joining us, so maybe he can.
Absolutely. So we're pleased to be joined by one of the great writers over at MASN, who covers the Nationals on a daily basis, taking time out of his break to join us. Byron Kerr is here. Byron, how are you?
Good, guys. Thank you very much. Hope you can hear me okay.
Yep, absolutely. We can hear you loud and clear. So before we dive into some specific topics, last year the Nats had a great first half, and it felt like this year they might have topped that first half from last year. What was your biggest takeaway from the first almost 90 games?
Yeah, it's too bad they lost Adam Eaton, guys, but I thought the offense and the starting nine that they put out there is the best I've ever seen. And you know how long this team has been around here, since 2005, and they've made playoff appearances in the past, but just an amazing lineup, and we're seeing the fruits of that now with how many of the guys that were in the All-Star game, with Ryan Zimmerman, Bryce Harper on that side of the infield, and Daniel Murphy. The 3, 4, 5, 6 hitters have I think I found out around 64 homers and 250 RBIs or something to that effect in the first 88 games. Just impressive stuff from those guys. And so I think that's the biggest thing that jumped out at me. And it's going to be a big question in the second half of the season and the postseason is, can that vaunted offense deliver when it matters most? Because that's one of the major things that's hurt them in the postseason, is they haven't been able to score a lot of runs. And
this team is deep, too. I mean, you talk about even though the injuries with Eaton and Turner and Worth, I mean, you get Brian Goodwin putting up good numbers, Stephen Drew, Wilmer Difo. That can only help this team in October, that so many guys are stepping up and putting up some nice numbers.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, I think at the top of the order, with a healthy Trey Turner and a healthy Michael A. Taylor, provided some offense and speed, rather, that maybe this particular crew didn't have. And when Brian Goodwin and Trey Turner were up there together, I know you guys watched many times when they were on base and those big hitters came up. I mean, they were right behind each other. They were scoring, milliseconds between each other. So it was like a train out there. They were so fast. And I love to add that kind of to this for the Nats, because that only makes the opposing pitcher pause even more, makes his life much more difficult to have that kind of speed at the top of the order. And, ideally, the situation they hope to have out there was Adam Eaton as their leadoff guy, a guy that was, a contact hitter that would be able to get on base. That was what they're hoping to do. But, you talked about it in your rundown before you started. Michael A. Taylor, I mean, maybe he could be that guy speed-wise, because he certainly can play great defense. And then I'm worried about that oblique, though. Injuries to the oblique, and we saw what it can do to hitters. That's kind of the one that always scares me, elbows and pitchers and obliques and hitters. So hopefully this time off during the All-Star break will help Michael A. Taylor get back. And Trey Turner seemed really confident, guys, when I talked to him in the clubhouse, that, obviously it's a broken hand, but, he watched what Freddie Freeman was able to do, and he's hoping he can get back maybe around, the first couple weeks of August.
Well, that'd be incredible if it was that fast. One of the big surprises this year, Byron, is Gio Gonzalez. So what did you see in him, and what can you attribute this turnaround to?
Great question. I mean, I've been really impressed with his pace at the beginning of the year. I think that has a lot to do with Matt Wieters. That was kind of the big offseason deal, obviously, at the catching position, was they couldn't get Wilson Ramos because of the injury from last year, so he had to move on, and they had Derek Norris all lined up to be the guy. And then they got Matt Wieters in the ninth hour to become the catcher. And a lot of people I had talked to, I said, well, why wouldn't they keep Derek Norris? And the price tag, and also because Jose Lobaton was the catcher for Gio Gonzalez. Well, that has not been the case really here in the beginning of the season. Dusty Baker has put his trust in Matt Wieters for Gio Gonzalez, and I think that's made a difference for Gio. He's doing such a great job with runners in scoring position. I think what was the opposing batting average, around 100 or something like that. So that's something that has bothered him in the past, is getting a risp in a risp situation where guys were on base, and then a 1-run inning turns into a 5-run inning. And so I've been very impressed with the way he's been able to keep his pace up, mix his pitches very well. And I give a lot of credit to Matt Wieters, and I give a lot of credit to Gio Gonzalez, who's having an outstanding year. And I think it's one of the big keys to the second half is can he maintain that? He seemed to be able to do it at the beginning of the year last year, but unable to sustain it for the whole season. So that'll be an important key for them, is can Gio do what he did in the first half?
For you, what was the biggest surprise of the first half?
Let's see. Biggest surprise. I didn't think this offense would be as good as it is. The starting pitching certainly is where it's at. I probably Ryan Zimmerman being able to hit so well from the beginning of the season. That was a big deal for me. I know he's kind of slowed down a little bit recently, but I love the way that he was going with pitches to the opposite field. And I think he kind of took it personally at the end of last year when he was injured, and that people were saying, he's not what he used to be. He's not the face of the franchise anymore. He's never going to be the hitter he used to be. And I think he worked really hard in the offseason, and he was healthy the whole offseason. And I think that's really helped him hit the ground running this year. So that's, I think, my biggest surprise is part of that 3, 4, 5, 6 is the hitting of Ryan Zimmerman. And he displayed it as well in the All-Star game, getting a base hit. I thought he made some nice plays on defense at first base as well. So I love what I've seen from Zimmerman. Now, as I just said, he's slowed down a little bit the last few weeks. And, he still gets a couple days off here, obviously, after the All-Star break. And see if the second half season has always been the good part for Ryan Zimmerman. So let's see if he can continue going. I like that as my biggest surprise from the first half.
That's a good one. It's not one that I don't think any of us expected as well, at least not to this extent. Speaking of also surprises, what's the big difference in this go-around for Michael A. Taylor as opposed to his other previous chances?
Very patient at the plate. He's done a really nice job of making some contact on breaking pitches. And, I think he got to the point with Rick Shue, the Nationals hitting coach, that he realized that maybe he won't be able to get hits on every single breaking pitch, but at least he can fight them off. I think he worked really hard with Anthony Rendon in the offseason, and Rendon kind of helped him as well. He's not panicking at the plate. He's not just a fastball hitter anymore. So I think that's made a big difference for him, is his patience in the box. He's taking a lot more pitches, and also he's fouling off bad pitches, which is keeping him in at bats. It's something he couldn't do last year.
So, Byron, we couldn't have you on the DoDCast without talking about the bullpen. So I'll throw this out to you, a little word association. I had to give you one word to describe the bullpen. What word would you use?
Disappointing. I mean, I think compared to the rest of this team, I guess, you'd hoped for so much more. And I mean, we're hearing a lot of rumors that, Mike Rizzo had opportunities to sign guys, or actually wanted to sign guys like the Kenley Janssens or the Mark Melancons or even Greg Holland or somebody like that in the offseason, and that his opportunities were vetoed by ownership. I don't know if that's true or not, but they are where they are right now, and it's the weakest part of the team is the bullpen. Now they have pitched better recently, even though they don't have a shutdown closer, which is what I think they're looking for, and something I've written about a lot, and you guys obviously know about. But it's been inconsistent from the beginning of the year, and because the rest of the team is so good, it has stood out. But also because the rest of the team is so good, they've been able to hang on without having to make any major decisions here with the bullpen before July 31st. So obviously that's something that they're going to monitor. Can they get a Kelvin Herrera? Can they get Alex Colomé? Can they make a deal with a team that maybe is looking to the future? Very possibly. They have talked so much with the White Sox about David Robertson, and you wonder if maybe that will come to fruition, because the White Sox just made a big deal today to get a lot more prospects. Maybe that will help the Nats soften that deal with the White Sox, and they won't have to give up a Victor Robles or something like that. But I still think that they're going to have to make a splash, just like they did last year at the back half of the bullpen, because that will be critical in beating a team like the LA Dodgers in the postseason.
You're around these relievers every day, and it just seems like when I use the analogy with Dusty, it's kind of like picking names out of a hat, because I'm sure you guys in the press box are wondering, okay, which reliever is going to be used today? And they're kind of in a weird spot where they're not in a lot of save situations, so it's really tough to figure out who's pitching the 8th, who's pitching the 7th, and I'm sure it has to play in the minds of a lot of these guys mentally.
Yeah, I mean, I think it does. I mean, they don't really have that closer that they wanted, and I think that's the biggest thing. But they do have an 8th inning guy, or could have an 8th inning guy. It could be Blake Trinan, could be Coda Glover if he's healthy, and they've had some other guys like Matt Albers, who's been an amazing find for them, even though he may not be everybody's first choice. He's been pretty consistent. Now, Sean Kelly, could he come back this week? We were tweeting about this earlier with Sammy Solis sent back to AAA Syracuse. Could that be the option with the trapezius? I don't know if he's close. I see him in the clubhouse, so that's a good sign that he doesn't look like he's hurting. But is that the answer? I don't know. Kelly only has 2 pitches, so Joe Blanton has never been what he was with the White Sox, and obviously he gave up that huge home run against the Cubs last year for the Dodgers. So there's some big questions. Eddie Romero seems to be coming around a little bit. That matchup with Freddie Freeman, I think, is the biggest highlight for him in the first half. He's building confidence. He's got the stuff. So they have some parts here that could work out. It just seems like if they got a Brad Hand from the San Diego Padres, maybe, or the Robertson or Herrera or Colomé or somebody, I don't know. You guys may have some ideas. They could be. They don't have to be a great bullpen, but they have to be able to get guys out in the 8th and 9th inning.
Is there a time frame on Glover at this point, or no?
I'm really concerned, guys, with the injury to Glover, because they first talked about the injury being one thing, and then it was his back, and now I don't think he's close. Maybe this week off when we see him, they're gonna have that long road trip as well. That's another 3 weeks or so. Maybe after that, we'll see if he's made some nice progress. But that one kind of scares me a little bit, and that's too bad, because he's certainly got a very promising future, and he's got that attitude like Max Scherzer has that this bullpen needs, but he just doesn't have the experience. And bottom line is he has to be healthy. So that's maybe this gap of the All-Star break and the long road trip will help him get back.
You also cover a lot of the minor leagues for MASN, so you're the perfect guy to ask this question to. Is Victor Robles untouchable?
I really thought he was with the trades last year. A lot of the sources that talked to me around the league were saying that everybody was asking about Victor Robles. They wanted Lucas Giolito. They wanted Reynaldo Lopez maybe as well. But Robles was the guy. That was the 5-tool guy that they were looking at, and the Nationals didn't want to part with him. Now, has that changed now because of what's happened in the bullpen? Who knows? But they have found with their Dominican Academy some guys that are going to be great players, I think. Juan Soto behind him as well, who has an ankle injury, he's trying to come back. But I think, Robles is a special player. And I wonder if you see like the Cubs give up their number 5 overall prospect in Eloy Jimenez today, would that change things? I mean, Victor Robles is the number 8 overall prospect and the number 1 Nats prospect. That's a great question, because I think he was untouchable in the offseason, but now that they're that close to a possibility for a World Series run, could he be sacrificed? I don't know. I think maybe the percentage has gone up just a little bit.
Yeah, I don't want to deal with Rick Hahn anymore. He's like the prospect wizard. He goes out there and acquires every top prospect. But the way I look at it with Robles, does Bryce Harper's contract situation play a factor on if they deal him? Because they would have to fill that spot in 2 years, and you would think Robles could be in a position to be in the lineup in a couple of years.
Yeah, I mean, and Jason Worth, too, as well in left field. That's something that they're going to have to look at. Now, it all depends on what happens at the end of this year, guys. If they win the World Series or something like that, even if they get to the NLCS, you may see some of these guys like, what, we can do this again next year, and you may be able to get them back next year, talking about like Jason Worth and things like that. absolutely, the outfield depth that they're trying to build is something that's going to protect them if Harper does move after next season. It was, I've been hearing that it was 50% chance, 50-50 before the season started. So I don't know what it is now. Obviously, Harper's just, quotes about New York. I don't know if that's what he means overall about playing there or anywhere else. But, the Nats still have a great chance, I think, to re-sign him. I think, now that he's married and he's seen what this team is capable of, if they go far in the playoffs this year, maybe that euphoria will help in the negotiations in the offseason.
What was your take on this whole shuffling of roles with Eric Fedde from starter to reliever to starter? How do you think he's going to impact this team in the second half?
I'd be surprised if we don't see him before September. I know when you see a starter move to the relief role, I think that might have been just to get him some experience in those high leverage situations and see if his stuff would play in the late innings. I still consider him to be a starter, even though they have moved him to the relief role. But absolutely, I'd love to see him in September and see what he can do. But I'd be surprised if we're going to see him in the next month and a half, though. But he's certainly shown that he's got the stuff, and he's very important because they did give up Dane Dunning, they did give up Giolito and Lopez, and they kept Fedde. So he's critical for that second wave. They don't have some of those guys that they thought were going to play out, at the starting role, and they're trying to. You saw their draft, how many pitchers they went after. So he's very important in that second wave. But I think the relief, is kind of like fool's gold a little bit. I don't think they want. I think it was more of an emergency situation if everything fell apart, that they might have him be a Coda Glover kind of guy. But I think he's built to be a starter in the future.
Real quick, any word on what we're going to hear about Joe Ross tomorrow?
Yeah, I mean the triceps tenderness, that's kind of scary. I mean, they did send down Sammy Solis, so there is a roster spot open. Will they make a couple of moves? They could. The fact I don't know. I guess I'm being optimistic here. The fact that we haven't heard anything in the last couple of days about Ross maybe is a good sign, but we've talked about it already on this dugout already. I'm worried about elbows, shoulders with pitchers, and when I hear triceps tenderness, that kind of scares me a little bit.
What have you made in his stuff? Because when he came up, the poise was there, the command was there, and it just seems like he's never returned back to being that guy that he was when he got called up.
Yeah, I mean, I think he was having some issues. Maybe it was the tricep tenderness, and maybe bothered him from the beginning, or maybe it was something else. Because the velocity was down, and anytime you see velocity down on a pitcher like that, that's a red flag for health to me. Something's going on that he doesn't feel 100% of. Now, he's an Adonis. He's a physical specimen, and he's young, so I still think that he's going to be fine. But just like hitters study pitchers, or just like pitchers study hitters, hitters study pitchers, and they watch video and they see what his go-to pitches were. So maybe he's learning to try to mix things up just like everybody else. But I just don't think his breaking pitches and his fastball wasn't where it was, and he wasn't commanding as well as he used to, and that was causing some problems early in the season. So I think it's just experience that he needs. And, the last few starts, as you look at the numbers, he started to get it back a little bit until what happened this weekend against Atlanta. So he's learning as he's going along.
Maybe we're spoiled with how good Steven Strasburg has been, but his last Saturday start in Atlanta and the couple of starts he's had to grind through outside of the 13-strike game in Chicago, is it time to be concerned with him just a little bit?
No, I don't think so, because, talking to him afterwards, guys, he wasn't concerned. He was upbeat and positive. Them's are the breaks kind of thing, I feel. And, he's such a veteran now. He's, he feels like one of the older guys, and he has more of a calmness about him. He's not letting one start here or there bother him. So, you mentioned keys to the second half. I think he's a critical key to the second half. I think they need him in the postseason to pitch well and offset, a 1-2 punch that the Dodgers might have, or the Brewers, or whoever else they might face. So I'd love to see him have a nice, long, and healthy second half. And I'm not reading too much into his hiccups the last couple starts.
Especially with Quintana in Chicago, if the Cubs rally to win that division, and that's the matchup. So it's going to be so many great
absolutely,
matchups in the LDS.
A lot of drama there in the second half. It's going to be fun.
Well, last one before we let you get out of here. Who is your second half X factor?
Yeah, I mean, I have to go back to Strasburg. I mean, I would, like you mentioned, I'm concerned about the last few starts. I'd love to have him continue what he did in the first half. And offensively, you know, the health of Trey Turner, I think, is a critical X factor. You need him to be healthy, and hopefully he has no setbacks from this hand issue, and he'll be able to get back and be a difference maker, because, you know, when he's stealing bases, that wreaks havoc for the other team. So, yeah, Turner and Strasburg for me are critical the second half.
You can follow Byron on Twitter at Masson Kerr and go to masonsports.com. He's got some great stuff on the minor leagues and all things Washington Nationals. Byron, again, thanks for hopping on. Keep up the great work, and we'll talk again soon. Thanks for the time.
We'll see you at the park, guys. Thanks a lot.
Thanks for being with us.
So that's Byron Kerr from MASN Sports. And, Ron, I think we got a lot out of that interview. Your takeaways, we got a lot of big news on this show.
Yeah. You know, I think a lot of it is potentially good, especially if Trey Turner is back the first couple of weeks of August, which can only be a couple of weeks away. And you know, I think but I also got a sense of concern over a couple of players too. What he talked about, wasn't sure about Taylor's oblique and Glover. But the good news is that even with all those people gone, they're still scoring runs in gobs and gobs and gobs.
Yeah, the oblique is a tough one with Taylor, because you rely on a lot for your offense and especially for a speed player like Taylor. Oblique's extremely important, especially the way he's been driving the ball over the last few weeks. I mean, yeah, you get the 4 days off, and that counts toward your DL stint. I don't think anybody was thinking that Taylor was going to only take 10 days for this injury.
Well, the way that he swings too, Ricky, he's got that short, compact swing. You know, it's not really fluid. It's like, you know, hitting a bat with a broom. But it works. And whatever, it doesn't necessarily have to be the sweetest, most textbook thing in the world, as long as it works. And for him, it was working.
The other big news I thought of that was Sean Kelly. It would be really interesting if they brought him up without a rehab game.
Well, they may be forced to do that. Because it looks like Glover is going to be gone for a while. And they certainly need pretty much all hands on deck. And if he comes back up soon without it, it builds into that process. Okay, who have we got here? And look, you and I have talked about that we think that they're going to need two pieces. They may not be able to get two pieces. You talked about the haul today with what the Cubs gave up to get Jose Quintana from the White Sox. If the Dodgers are successful and somehow can lift Zach Britton from the Baltimore Orioles, as was speculated on by people in national media today, I mean, you can only carve up Victor Robles so many different ways. He's only going to one team.
Exactly, and I think what also plays a factor in the prospect haul would be Juan Soto's ankle injury.
Right.
He has not come back. In fact, he was on a rehab assignment and is not on one anymore. So you have to wonder if that injury was re-aggravated or if something else happened. Carter Kieboom hasn't played since April or early May. That plays a factor. And those are two of your top prospects. You need Eric Fetty to start games for you potentially in the second half. So you can't really afford to trade him.
I'm with Byron. I think you see him before September just so he's playoff eligible. And if that means that he's your long reliever out of the pen come October, because that's the one time that you actually need someone that might get 3 or 4 innings once or twice, you probably will see that happen.
And it's going to take a while for him to build up, too. I mean, he's going to pitch tomorrow night against Pawtucket, but he has not thrown more than 3 innings in a game yet. He's got to build that arm up 2, 3, 4, 5 more innings before you even think about calling him up.
Right. So, as I said earlier, I think that they want to get 2 pitchers, but they're only really going to be able to get 1. And he mentioned the names Colomé and Robertson, which I'm not sure if they can financially afford Robertson. That puts them well over the competitive balance tax.
You would have to eat a lot of money in that deal.
And I don't.
Chicago would for that to happen.
They would, and that of course means higher prospects back.
And you don't want to deal with we're going to call Rick Hahn on the show the prospect wizard.
My goodness, he's Pac-Man. Gobble, gobble.
It's insane what that deal today. But, I mean, column A, the Rays are still in it. Somehow, I don't think they're giving up their closer. They're in the race. The Royals are still in the wild card in the Central, so I don't think Guerrero's going anywhere. You're really looking a guy I like, and if you're looking at a setup role, would be Justin Wilson. I think that he makes a lot of sense. He's only under contract for one more year after this year. And they could, that would be another left-hander, and they have a lot of lefties already, but Wilson has proven the lefties and righties in the past that can do a bunch of different roles for you.
Well, and Brad Hand, too, which you mentioned. If you're looking for, again, that's another kind of hybrid. He's not a closer, but, the Nationals really don't have a true closer. And yet they hold a huge lead in the National League East and won 52 games and blah, 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 blah. I know what conventional wisdom says, but this team has defied it as far as I'm concerned. Do you honestly think that when you lose Worth, Taylor, and Eaton out of that outfield, that you're out there throwing out there Ryan Rayburn and Brian Goodwin to platoon, that the team's still, they're still a midly 500 team in the last 3 weeks, but they really haven't lost any ground and can still can score a ton of runs.
Let me bring up that point that you brought up, that they've been a barely over 500 team over the last 36 games. I think Mark Zuckerman wrote about it on MASN. They just played a stretch, I think only like 2 days off in like 37 games. They were going out west, and to even play that stretch over 500, I know people say, "Oh, you got the easiest schedule. You should play that way." But they played well for that, considering how many games and how many days they had to play.
They played 29 games in 30 days, with all the injury problems that they've had, along with some spotty starts by Strasburg. Now, we didn't even talk to Byron about Tanner Roark, and now you have to worry about Joe Ross. Despite all that, they didn't really lose any ground. You can worry about October when you get there, and as he said, once Turner becomes healthy again, and once the weather cools and Strasburg figures out what's going on there. This is a team that, as you remember, did 2 West Coast road trips. They went 9-1 in the second one, including taking 2 out of 3 in Los Angeles. And that was without any.
And since then, the Dodgers haven't lost, seems like.
Well, you can't control that. You can control what happens in September when the Dodgers come east, but you really you can't keep up with Cody Bellinger. You can only hope to contain him.
It feels that way for sure. And I think when we talk about the bench, and I was talking about with Byron, I think when you get to the postseason and your bench is critical, you're going to have a lot of tough roster decisions, and that's a good thing because so many guys, Goodwin, Drew, Diffo's playing better, Taylor, Rayburn, the list goes on. Like, there's so many options Dusty's going to have to choose from.
Well, I think the thing with Defoe, Ricky, is that they started to play him more. You and I were stunned when we looked at it. I don't know if this has changed just before the break, but at one point last week, they were 17-4 in games that he started. And that's just eye-dropping. And one of our regular readers on Twitter and I were talking during one of the games. As soon as he got regular playing time, the bat speed came back. The defense came back. Thankfully, they didn't put him back in the center field. And that's a West Palm Beach project. That's not what you do against the New York Mets. Or if you do, it's the New York Mets, the Port St. Lucie Mets masquerading around as a big club, and that's not the case. Rayburn, what a huge surprise he's been. You're right. They have some very difficult decisions to make once we get into October. But the good thing is they all have experience. They've all played, and they've all played together. So it's not like you're trying to put a square peg into a round hole, maybe an oval peg into a round hole. But, it's not, maybe we look back at this in mid-October and go, this whole spiel stretch did a lot of good for the team.
maybe I'm reading a little too much into it. And I know Byron kind of said, don't be concerned on Strasburg. He was supposed to pitch, as we found out after we did the All-Star show Tuesday. Jamal Collier, I guess, caught up with him and said that he was supposed to pitch in the 12th if it got there. And now with the second half rotation set up, and he's not pitching till Monday, like Tanner Roark's going to start over him. That would be something, maybe, again, Ron, maybe I'm reading into it a bit too much, but that's a long time to go without pitching for Strasburg.
Well, Kerr was correct about the other injuries. Not that I think he was wrong about anything, but as far as the ones that he was concerned about were the ones that concerned me the most. Now, he has a ton more experience than I do, so I'm not trying to say that I'm the expert here by any stretch, but he emphatically denied that there was anything wrong with Strasburg. And I guess it kind of caught me by surprise a little bit. But again, it goes back to, I mean, we wish we had a little more time, but he was very generous to give us the time that he did. Is this a dehydration issue with Strasburg? It wasn't the last start. It was, a couple of weeks ago, Rick. They played one of those late afternoon games, I think it was. And the sweat was dripping off the bill of his hat like someone was turning a hose onto it. I mean, that can't be healthy.
Okay, look at this. I'll try to get that stat line for you because I think I know what one you're talking. I'm
right.
not the Atlanta one early in June, but I think it was the
I think it was one after that and before the holiday weekend.
The Cincinnati game.
Right. I mean, he was out there sweating like an old NBA center playing in the finals in June. I mean, how could you not be concerned about that? I'm glad that it's not. I mean, he's done such great things out of the stretch. It's just surprising to see him bad. I personally, we talked about this Tuesday night. I'm not upset at all that he didn't pitch in the All-Star game.
Yeah, I don't think a lot of people were either, and I think if they were upset, it was more upset that Gio didn't go than opposed to Strasburg pitching or not.
That doesn't mean that Madden was going to take him, though.
No, and Joe Madden got what. No, I won't say got what he deserved. That's the wrong way to say it, but his own reliever blew the game anyway. So
right, you can tell it's a bad year for the Cubs.
But I don't know. I'm looking at that deal, Ron, what they did, and I know the White Sox I think they're gonna love Jimenez. He breaks stadium lights and home run derbies and all. The kid looks great, even though he's only in high A. But I'm looking at if the Cubs do rally and win that division, they're only 5.5 behind Milwaukee. I don't know what Milwaukee's going to add, but you look at potentially throwing out the Scherzer, Arrieta, Strasburg, Quintana, whenever Hendricks come back, Lester. I mean, you're looking at if the Nats were to play the Cubs and everybody would be healthy in the rotation, that's some kind of pitching show.
Yeah, the Cubs are still not a team I want to play in the playoffs. You know, that's built to survive in October, and if they get there, there's enough experience there. They can, especially in a best-of-5 series. It's not who I want to be playing. I'd much rather have the Milwaukee Brewers.
With John Lackey coming out of the bullpen?
You got to have to – after Lackey's start against the Nationals was god-awful, you kind of – and the one after that I think was even worse. You kind of have to wonder just how much is in the tank for John. Yeah,
I would think so because, I mean, the Cubs are deep. I mean, I like their offense. I think Happ has been huge for them. The only question I think Chicago has, it's not as dire as the Nationals bullpen, but there's nothing really before Wade Davis that you fear. And
right,
Davis even hasn't been what he was a couple years ago in Kansas City.
You can only – I mean, it's the same thing with the Royals from before, and the Cubs are going through it this year, and I think a little bit with the Giants as well. Is that, look, you only have so many innings. And when you throw all those extra pressure pitches, as Kansas City did in their 2 World Series, they didn't win the first time. But when they when they lost to the Giants and then beat the Mets, and then the Cubs lost to the Mets in the NLCS 2 years ago and went to the World Series last year, that's a lot of extra innings on your arm, especially with 3 rounds of playoffs now. So all those starters got, so they're not starting 3 games. The Aces are starting 3 games in the World Series anymore. But they're starting one, maybe two each round, and that all adds up because you're amped and you're throwing harder.
The one thing you brought up a little bit earlier was Zach Britton, and I was talking to you before we hopped on with Byron. I'm not going to say Dodgers, if they did get Britton, would be the wave the white flag moment for anybody else in the National League, because obviously you got to worry about injuries and any other wild cards that might happen. But that's a super team without Zach Britton. And you had him with Jansen in the back. That's ask for trouble, and the Nats, obviously, the team to beat right now in the National League is LA.
Right. If
Britton were to be acquired for the Nats than anything else, that would maybe handicap how I would go about this deadline.
I would think so. I think a lot of teams looked at how the Royals had that run a couple years ago, and that was simply because you're not going to get a run off them after the seventh inning. The names may have been interchanged. Holland, it was the first year, and then Davis in 15, but you knew that if you didn't get to that starter by the sixth inning, that you weren't going to get to that bullpen. And last year, kind of the aberration of what Terry Francona did with Andrew Miller, and then we saw what Chapman in the World Series. I don't think teams are going to risk it. I think it's still back to the Kansas City formula: 6 innings out of your starter and hope for the best. I mean, when the Yankees were successful 10 years ago, that's how they did it. They got the game to your starter only went 6, and you knew Rivera was pitching the 9th, and so you slammed the door in the 7th and 8th. You weren't going to lose that game. And the Nets can't do that.
Mm-hmm. No, of course. And if you're Baltimore, you have to worry about your next year and a half. I mean, Zach Britton's a free agent after 2018. Manny Machado's a free agent after 2018. And Baltimore's farm system is not very good. I mean, they're in a position where they can unhaul Britton, Brad Brock, and get a lot because they're not going to trade Machado.
Right. And in fact, that may free up the money to keep Machado if he wants to stay. I mean, it really is the face of their franchise. Plays with a lot of bravado, but backs it up. You can play with that giant chip on your shoulder when you do what he does.
Yeah, let's just say that Chris Davis' contract does not look really good for Baltimore right now, and they're any hope of that. But let's get back to the Nets, and the big news today outside of the rotation was officially Sammy Solis sent back down to AAA, and you and I both like Sammy Solis. We both think that he's a good pitcher for this bullpen because he can get lefties and righties out. And when he got called up, Ron, you and I looked at those rehab numbers, and again, we're watching some of the games we're not watching every Syracuse game. Something just was not right with him, and it showed up in the minor league stats, and it kind of showed up in the big leagues.
I wonder if they rushed him up. I mean, they put him on the 60-day for paperwork reasons. I forget for which transaction that was. Then he was up the next day within 48 hours. And I believe his last game was Saturday, and there was nothing there. And you know that he's much more talented than that. Whether they rushed him, whether because they're so desperate to find bullpen for people for the pen, or what, I think it's a case that maybe he just wasn't ready. The last few line scores I saw from Syracuse, as you said, they weren't great. But they kept him down there a long time too. I mean, he started one game and threw 1 inning. So, hopefully with a couple weeks, he can go through and find what it is he needs to work on. I don't think they might have brought him back too early.
Here's other bullpen news for you. Francisco Rodriguez is in Hagerstown starting tonight against Charleston. So if you're in Hagerstown and you want to get a ticket, go watch K-Rod start the game tonight. I'm sure he's not a starter. I guess just getting an inning or two. But that's kind of the minor league theme of the night if you want to dive into that. But looking back at the Solis thing, I think what helps you not being able to rush him, at least now, is how good Matt Grace has been.
Oh, absolutely.
Being called up. I mean, he did not look. This is probably the best he's looked since being called up a couple of years ago.
Yeah, and what Eddie Romero did, as Byron said earlier, to Freddie Freeman and Matt Kemp. I mean, he got Freeman at 101 and Kemp at 100. on just absolutely filthy stuff. The pieces, there are good pieces there, but you said, I don't know if this was on air or just before we started, they have the 4th worst 8th inning ERA in all of baseball.
Yeah, John Morosi from Fox Sports Affiliate Network wrote about that the Nationals' 8th inning ERA is the 4th worst in the major leagues. And
that doesn't surprise me, because I think that because the closer problems are the more public ones. We've all talked about consistently. This is a 2-pitcher problem, and the 8th concerns me almost more so than the 9th.
Before we look at the second half storylines, and Drew Douglas wrote up his storylines, which you can find on the District on Deck right now. Let's look back at the first half. We didn't really get to do this on Tuesday with the All-Star Show. A lot of great memories in the first half. So, Ron, what was your favorite?
Oh, goodness. The Scherzer near no-hitter in Miami. Yes, there was a 23-5 game, and the resurgence of Zimmerman and Rendon and all that. But that was a game that I did live on Twitter and did the DoDCast after. I honestly thought he had that no-hitter. Watching Max Scherzer every 5th day is a privilege. And there are times that, we sit there and do these and think, oh, goodness. But, it's like rapt attention and, a no-hitter every time you go out there. And he's so smart about it, too. I guess that is a highlight for me. I honestly thought that he was going to pull that one off.
Believe it or not, the news that he was starting Saturday against Luis Castillo was first reported by Joe Buck. So right. Nobody knew about it until Joe Buck said, oh, yeah, Scherzer's going to throw on Saturday. But that'll be interesting. He's always fun to watch, no question about it. He had a great first half. I'll give you 3 of my favorite, maybe more so games as opposed to moments. One being the Matt Wieters walk-off against Baltimore. They were down big in that game, and you did the DoDCast after that one, and I think that game showed that they were never out of anything. That this team would always fight back from, even if they were 4 down, 5 down, they're going to keep scratching and grinding and trying to win games.
Come off that long, successful West Coast trip, and you're right. And it was a game that no one really wanted to play. The Orioles harped about it in the press for days afterwards. And you're right. They've had a couple of those. But, yeah, the Wieters beating his own team on what would have been an off day, I mean, that was big.
The Trey Turner cycle in Colorado, because I think that got Trey Turner back to being Trey Turner again, and their offense was so much fun. That made, when we're up at 1 a.m. doing those DoDcasts, they're scoring 16 runs. That's what keeps us up, because that's a lot of fun. And, of course, how could we not forget the Bryce Harper-Hunter Strickland fight that led to the Nats winning 9 out of 10 on that trip, I'm sure.
It's one of those moments that you just – I was doing that game, and you're just kind of watching, and like, oh, they're going to fight. Oh, this is legit. Fun. Isn't that fun? And, boy, there was some great internet memes after that. Don't you talk to my son like that. And all that. But, yeah, and I kind of bound them together, because at that point, San Francisco still had a snowball's chance in hell of trying to recapture their season. And after that, the Giants never recovered. They weren't in great shape before that, but they really never recovered from getting swept.
No, not at all. So now we looked at the first half. What's your biggest storyline, Ron, in the second half?
I really think it depends on getting those injured players back. You hope that Ross's time away is short. You need Michael A. back in center field. You certainly need Turner back there. Look, we know that the pitching is probably going to be what it is unless they go out and get a Raisel Iglesias and Colome, or if the Blue Jays decide to trade away Roberto Osuna, you're not getting that A++ closer. You're putting a prettier band. You get the Mickey Mouse Band-Aid as opposed to the regular Band-Aid, but you can erase a lot of sins by scoring 6-7 runs a game. because it just makes it, as you said, with the Wieters game, and there were a couple others. There was a Harper walk-off in there, too, recently.
Against Philly?
And against Atlanta, wasn't there?
There was Murphy was Atlanta, I believe.
You had the Rayburn, that if you can score 6-7 runs at will, your pitchers can give up 5 runs. You can score 6.
Especially when Joe Ross pitches, you can score 15.
He's living the life of Riley there. When you have 10 runs of support per start, unbelievable.
So that's another moment. Anthony Rendon going 6 for 6, and the team scoring 23 runs in one game.
Yeah,
you rarely ever see that.
When the people from Rising Apple don't talk to us anymore,
they don't like us over there. We keep asking. No, they're good people. We like them, but
yeah,
they want to come on after they win. Sadly, we don't control that.
Right.
Well, for me, I want to look at what Dusty might do with the lineup, and it ties in with your injured players. I don't think he is injured, but Ryan Zimmerman, I think I wrote about it today. His slump's kind of concerning. He has not hit a home run in about a month. I think only has like 2 or 3 doubles since middle of June. He's getting his hits. He's not doing terrible, but at some point they need him. When this offense is the best in the game, that's when he's on his game. And he had a great first half, no question about it. But I think if he continues to struggle, does Dusty put Daniel Murphy behind Bryce Harper and sort of keep the lefties together, but mix that up a little bit like he did last year? And does Anthony Rendon move up? He's doing one of the best 6 hitters in the league, but over the last 30 games, he's hitting 365 and an on-base over 470. I mean, at some point, does Anthony Rendon go back to the top of the order?
I think he kind of has to. You can always lower Zim. Wieters was struggling for a while too, and he seems to have found his pace again the last week or so. You've talked about this on the show before. We're certainly talking about it off the air. Zimmerman hasn't played more than 100 games the last few years, and he's played pretty much every day. I mean, he took some time off before the break, but as we talked about earlier, when you play 29 games in 30 days, you're all tired. And I really think that's a lot of it was him. I mean, he did get hit in the All-Star game and was kind of on the wrong end of Arenado trying to advance to second.
Crushed the ball at dead center in that game. That makes it kind of alleviated some of the concern for me that he got the ball that far off of, I think it was Vargas.
And the ball was really dead in the All-Star game, too, until Yadier Molina or C-3PO crushed that home run. But yeah, I think if you gotta move Zim back down by Wieters at the end of the lineup, Rendon, I really think is the most underrated player in the division.
He's never made an All-Star team, which is kind of surprising considering he was 5th in the MVP vote a few years ago.
And he'll draw MVP points this year too. He won't win it, but I don't know where this team would be without Rendon.
I'm wondering how many Nats draw top 10 MVP votes in the National League this year.
Judo Joker is a friend of the show. Makes a good point about Scherzer possibly drawing MVP votes. And how could you not? You sit there, go 7-8 innings every night, and ERA under 2 and a WHIP under 0.8. I mean, my goodness.
Draw MVP votes and still lose the side to Clayton Kershaw. Although Joe Madden was the one who said, hey, I would have still taken Max Scherzer over Clayton Kershaw, but I find that hard. I mean, he's been great, but I just find that hard to believe.
I think Scherzer hasn't had the run support that Kershaw has. But I mean, that's kind of like, do you like steak or do you like lobster?
not a bad choice either way.
Right.
I don't think anybody would have ripped him like, oh, you took Kershaw over Scherzer. If Kershaw was available to pitch. But you look at Kershaw's numbers, I mean, 14-2 with a 2.19.
Right.
You don't see that anymore.
No, except for – and Scherzer's one-loss record has not been helped. I mean, he lost the game that he shouldn't have had the no-hitter.
Right.
He doesn't get all the – if Joe Ross would share some of his run support with Scherzer, Scherzer's record would be similar.
And I think when you look at the second half, and we'll kind of wrap it up with this. These next 9 games are going to be a little bit challenging. It's always tough to start off your first 9 on the road. Cincinnati, who played you really tough a month ago in D.C., and they're a team that can slug the ball. The Angels I think for all of baseball's sake, hope they get Mike Trout back. That would be a lot of fun. And Arizona, which played some competitive games in May, and they look pretty good. But you look at the stretch between Arizona, Milwaukee, and Colorado, with the Brewers and Rockies coming to Nats Park, that's going to be the next defining test about this team against playoff contenders.
It's a big test, especially those series against Arizona, Milwaukee, and Colorado. They'll be done with Arizona and Colorado after those series are done, but they had to go to Miller Park sometime, I think, in August.
Yeah, late August, early September, I think it is. To
go do their 4 games against Milwaukee.
And they have Houston. People forget they got to play Houston in August. Right. So that makes it even better. Yeah, absolutely. So let's wrap it up right here. We have, again, Drew storylines are up. We have Marco and Ryan Zimmerman. I'll have 5 to watch for the Reds tomorrow. We have some Ron talked about, and you want to add on to this, Ron, your closer trade target power rankings.
Right. I took the 5 I thought I did not include Addison Reed, and I didn't include anyone that wasn't going to be in anything in guys. So there's no Brad Hand, there's no Pat Neshek on the list. I did 5. I did Iglesias was 1 from Cincinnati. Osuna was 2 from Toronto. Robertson, who I think is ultimately who they'll get, at 3, and I put Ryan Madsen at 4 from the A's, and Sean Doolittle at 5. Because they potentially can close. They've done it before. This is the position that they could not fill over the winter, and if they're going to advance out of the first round, they have to have somebody. Ultimately, I think it is Robertson. But be curious to see who that actually, when we have this conversation in 3 weeks, who it was they actually got.
Yeah, absolutely. And I did a 5 prospects to watch a potential trade. You got names like Juan Soto, Jesus Luzardo, who's throwing mid-90s in Gulf Coast League, coming back from Tommy John. Andrew Stevenson, who could be next in line. They're 1 outfield injury away from Andrew Stevenson, I think.
Absolutely.
He's been hitting over 300 over the last month in AAA. So he's a name to really consider at this point. His early season struggles are over. The way he's been playing. We also have a couple of articles going. We're gonna try to. We don't know what we got tomorrow, but that's why you gotta go to district.deck.com. I gotta tell you everything we got going up because we want you to read it. So definitely go to district.deck.com. Check out all of our stuff over there. Give this video a like and subscribe to the channel. Great interviews going up. I did an interview with Eric Fetty last week. Which he gave a lot of good info about how he prepares for starts and prepared when he was in the bullpen. So you definitely want to check that out. You can like us on Facebook. Follow us on Twitter at DistrictOnDeck. Follow me at Rickinator555. Ron, how can they follow you?
At Ron Juckett, Juckett.
Absolutely. So definitely give us both a follow. Follow Drew on Twitter. I don't have Drew's Twitter on handy. I kind of should. I'll get that for you real quick.
Drew V. Something.
Drew RD98. If you want to follow Drew, because Ron and Drew are going to be here this weekend.
We are the babysitters this weekend.
They are back with you for Nats Reds. I'm not back with you till Los Angeles. You spend a late night with me talking about Bryce Harper and Mike Trout next week. So that should be a lot of fun. A little Nats Angels action. So definitely listen to we do post games after every game if you're new to the show. So you watch the Nats game, come back with us and talk about it. That's why we're here. We want you to chime in, give us your thoughts. If you're mad about the bullpen, feel free to vent about the bullpen. That's what we do on DoDCast. And sometimes they're happy recaps, sometimes they're sad recaps. But they've been a lot of fun to do this year. We're looking forward to second half and hopefully to doing some playoff ones too.
Absolutely.
And I'm sure we'll obviously give you cover with rumors. We'll have trade deadline stuff. Maybe we'll do a trade deadline show in a couple of weeks. So that should be fun. So stay here, District on Deck. We'll have all the great stuff here. And again, our thanks to Byron Kerr from MASN for taking the time to chat with us on his break. A lot of great insight, a lot of breaking news we got from Byron, which I did not expect that.
That was great. That was great.
So from all of us here at District on Deck, for Ron, I'm Ricky saying hope you have a great rest of your day. Baseball is back, and tune in tomorrow after Nats Reds for our first second half postgame show.
Bye.